for joining and for getting involved in some of these early interactive elements. As Pearl said, I'm only going to talk for about 30 minutes out of this entire thing. The rest of the time is going to be for all of you to do some solo reflection and talk to each other. But this is really exciting. And frankly, it's an experiment because I've seen some of the questions that have already come through in the chat about understanding the bigger picture of, are there master lists of all the employee sustainability communities? Or the participant who came off mute and was like, we want to meet somebody else in our sector who's organizing. As far as I can tell, and I'm paying about as close attention to this as anybody, the answer is no. But we're starting to lay the groundwork for some sort of giant super community. And I suspect work on climate will play an important role on that. So I did want to really quickly cover what my goals are for the session as your expert, as the person who's driving the masterclass. Number one, we're going to define what employee sustainability communities are, because as you'll see, there's actually a lot of different ways that people kind of do this. And we're going to share good practices from my experience as a co-founder of Microsoft's community, which is now 10,000 people. Through the masterclass and the interactive elements, we're going to give you the tools and resources that you need to advocate for employee engagement in your organization. This is the umbrella term that you're going to be very familiar with at the end of this session that will help you make the case for why there should be an employee sustainability community, why it deserves budget, formal resourcing, and why activating the bulk of the workforce who aren't sustainability professionals or don't have it in their job titles is going to be a critical part of your organization's sustainable transformation. We're definitely going to share practical tips that help you organize a community where you work. That's when we come back from the break in the second half. And then, as Pearl said, we're here to learn from all of you as much as you're here to learn from us. I am, in particular, very excited to get the share outs from the breakout and group sessions that we do, because none of us has the full big picture of this. We all have little pieces of the puzzle. But hopefully by the end of our time here together today, we will all understand common challenges and opportunities doing those collaborative group exercises. And then finally, of course, you already covered this at the beginning, but we're going to make some new friends. We're going to learn in the open, and we're going to have fun. So if we haven't met yet, hello, my name is Drew Wilkinson. I'm coming to you live from Seattle, Washington, the traditional territory of the Duwamish people, the first people of this land whose territory has never officially been ceded. Unfortunately, the tribe does not have federal recognition in the United States, and so they do not have any of the benefits that come with being an official tribe. And so if you're interested in learning more about the Duwamish people and their struggle, and maybe even donating to them, you can go to realrentduwamish.com. That's realrentduwamish.com, and you can pay rent to the tribe. So as you can see here, I have had a pretty colorful life/career. For a while, I was in a touring punk band. After that, I was on a boat with an organization called Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. And I spent the last 7 years at Microsoft, where I co-founded the first employee sustainability community at the company. And as we'll see, over the 5 years from the time that we founded it to the time that I left the company earlier this year, the community not only grew to 10,000 members, but it actually pushed the company from the inside to become the sort of corporate climate leader that it's known as today. So hello, it's really nice to be here with all of you. My mission is to make sustainability part of everybody's job. And I do this now through my own consulting practice on employee engagement, community organizing, green skilling. I work on the people side of sustainability because I believe that that's where we're going to get the most lever for change. If every one of you goes forward after this and starts agitating for change and organizing inside your companies, imagine the tidal wave that we can create across, I don't know, 100 companies, 100 industries. Making sustainability part of everybody's job is the future of sustainability work inside of organizations. I am convinced of that from my experience. Now, I'm going to start by level setting with some definitions, because what I see all the time is that we use these words when we're doing climate work, but we don't always have a shared understanding of what we mean when we say them. And that's a really critical first step to getting things off the ground. So I'm going to throw 3 words out. I'm going to define them, and then we're going to move on, but they're going to pop up frequently throughout the masterclass. So the first one, maybe unsurprisingly, is sustainability. So when I say sustainability, what I mean is to create and maintain the conditions that allow humans and nature to coexist for present and future generations. When we talk about employee engagement, what we mean is actions to increase employee participation in a company's environmental sustainability efforts. And when I talk about employee sustainability communities, sometimes called green teams, what I mean is a group of employees within a company who are organized around the topic of sustainability. And so the community provides resources, support, and structure to help make sustainability part of everybody's job, to help get employees educated, inspired, and activated. Now, I always like to throw this one in because I don't know about you, but I grew up with the Matrix. So what if I told you that employee sustainability communities can help unlock resources and job opportunities for you and all of your colleagues at the places where you already work? Now, I know many of you who are members of Work on Climate are trying to figure out how you can get a job in climate. Well, the traditional path is to quit the job you have and go apply for the one that you don't, and that's a perfectly viable path. But I hope that by the end of our time here today, you'll understand that there's another path that's actually more accessible to many of us. And that is to get your own company to get more serious about sustainability. And when that happens, the resources start flowing. And the most effective way to do that is to organize with your colleagues. So let's get started. We're going to take a look at the Microsoft Employee Sustainability Community as a good practice example. I'm going to show you what we did. And then when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how we did it and distill that down into some simple lessons that you can take forward as you go forth and do this work in your organization. Okay, so we're going to watch a video. These are notoriously finicky with the sound, so I'm going to start it. And then if you could just let me know that the sound is working.
Sustainability cuts across everything that we do at Microsoft. From how we run our core operations, develop and deploy our products and services, partner with customers around the world, and how we use our voice on critical policy matters. Everything that we do is by and because of our employees. Empowering our global workforce is at the center of our sustainability strategy.
Since 2018, Microsoft employees have self-organized into a grassroots sustainability community and found creative ways to leverage their experience, skills, and passion to help the company achieve its ambitious sustainability commitments to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030.
It started with a handful of us.
Now, with the help of Connected Communities program,
the Sustainability Connected community has over 6,000 members and 35 chapters across the world.
Our mission is simple: make sustainability part of everybody's job.
Everybody's job.
Everybody's job.
The SEC gives every employee at Microsoft a chance to meaningfully contribute to the sustainable transformation currently underway.
It provides a centralized platform to educate, inspire, and activate our entire workforce.
And using the Power Up community, it gives everyone the tools and resources needed to create real-world solutions to the world's most pressing environmental challenges.
Most importantly, we are driving a wave of culture change and putting the health and well-being of the planet at the center of everything we do.
The SEC inspired thousands of Microsoft employees to find the unique ways they can make sustainability part of their jobs and personal lives.
Okay, Pro, can you just come off mute so I can make sure I can actually hear you? Because last time I lost audio after I shared it. Okay, gotcha. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so that video is already a couple of years old, but it's a really nice artifact that we were able to create because the community had top-down support, a budget. We were able to sort of tell this story to the outside world. But as all good communities begin, it started with humble beginnings. And so back in 2018, myself and my co-founder, Holly, who's down there in the front in the pink dress, decided, after having success as just 2 employees, convincing Microsoft to open its first zero waste cafeteria, we wondered, what if there were thousands of us? And so we started networking and asking around and basically threw a call to action out to any employee in the Seattle area who wanted to come meet up with us and help us answer this question collectively. What can we do as employees? And so this is actually a photo from the very first meeting. Like I said, back in the summer of 2018, we had no idea that it would turn into something much larger. We had no idea that it would be this kind of successful push from the inside to actually get the entire company to get more serious about sustainability. As you're probably familiar with in your journey, you start with more questions than answers. But the bigger tent you build, the more people you invite to come answer that with you, the faster you're going to get to collective power and eventually to answers to some of those questions. And so in the 5 years since that first meeting, the community has come a very long way. It's now at 10,000 members with almost 40 chapters around the world. There are members in more than 100 countries. There are 50 volunteer leaders who run the 10 global programs that actually turn the cranks on the community every single day, every month, every week. Things like community calls, newsletters, monitoring the chat forums and the digital infrastructure that's required to run a hyperscale community like this. Just like what you're familiar with inside the Work on Climate Slack, the internal employee community at Microsoft also has tens of thousands of conversations that are happening every year. As you saw from that video, it's actually part of Microsoft's sustainability strategy. So not only did it push the company in the years leading up to 2020, when Microsoft made its big, ambitious 2030 sustainability commitments to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste, but when the new strategy came out for how the company was actually going to do that, they said, we recognize that employees are going to be a critical part of how we make that real. And the employee community was the primary mechanism that the company used to actually engage the workforce. And then something that those of us who are around from the beginning have always been very proud of, it was always been a 100% volunteer, bottom-up, grassroots, and employee-led initiative. Does enjoy top-down support, executive sponsorship from the CSO, which we'll talk about a bit later, but it's always been by and for employees. And something worth noting here, we're not going to go deep into it now, but when we come back after the break, it is a community of practice, which is a different kind of community than you might be familiar with, an employee resource group or ERG. And so you can see here, this picture comes from Microsoft's external-facing sustainability report that employees play a critical role in advancing climate innovation. So it came a really long way. And like I said, in the beginning, we had no idea that it would do this, but you never know until you try. And so that's maybe the first lesson is you have to go out and start building before you know what this can become. And dream big, because sometimes it gets much bigger than you ever thought it would. So that sounds all good, right? There's 10,000 people, it's got top-down support, it's got a budget. How does it actually work? Well, there's one global community. It's predominantly virtual, but it does have a local chapter model. So that allows for simplicity for discovery for employees in the company. There's just one community that they go join, one membership, one place they go look, but it also gives the flexibility to have sub-communities, in this case, local chapters, where employees from around the world can organize in their local time zone, in their native language. Sustainability looks different in Singapore than in Seattle. And so it's a sort of franchise model where there's one tent, everybody's underneath it so that we can all learn from each other's experiences and know what's going on. But there's a kind of decentralized model for sub-communities. There's generally speaking two ways for members to participate in the community: synchronously and asynchronously. So synchronously, it's things just like this, moment in time calls. The community runs several calls every single month. There's a monthly community call where we talk about what's going on around the company and around the world. There's usually a call every month with a sustainability professional, a sort of informational session. But then because it's a global community, you're never going to be able to host calls in time zones that work for everybody. So there's lots of asynchronous ways for employees to contribute as well. So there's always on discussion forums like Work on Climate in Slack. There's an always on hackathon platform. There's a monthly newsletter that gets sent out for the busy employee member who can't keep up with everything. You're really trying to meet people where they're at and create live and in-person volunteer events, synchronous opportunities, but also giving people the freedom and the flexibility to engage with the community, maybe on that Friday afternoon when they finally have a few minutes to themselves. And then the community has 3 layers of resourcing. So the first is that top-down mandate, that support, that executive sponsorship from the Chief Sustainability Officer. And we're going to hammer on this point over and over again. If your community does not have the active sponsorship of a CSO or an equivalent, that is one of the most important things that you can do to add legitimacy and resourcing to your community. And so with that top-down support comes budget. So you can make fancy videos and run movie screenings and do all kinds of stuff. Companies that are serious about things throw money at it. So that's an important part of it. The second layer of resourcing is those 50 volunteer leaders that I mentioned. So on average, they spend 2 to 3 hours a week for 6 months at a time, running an initiative, running a program, taking ownership of a piece of the community so that it thrives and grows for everybody else. And then the final layer of resourcing is, as I mentioned, it is a community of practice. It is part of a formally resourced communities of practice program inside the company, one of almost 100. And so there's an entire team. That's the job that I had when I was at Microsoft for the last couple of years as a community organizer. There's an entire program of communities of practice, and that provides another layer of support. So let's talk about the unique role that community can play, because community can't solve every problem for a company. It's not a direct substitute for a real centralized sustainability team who are actually setting targets and commitments, measuring and reducing, but community can play an extremely unique role in changing the culture in an organization. So the first thing that communities can uniquely do is innovation, right? At the end of the day, we saw this in some of the chat at the beginning of the session. What this is actually about goes far beyond just operationalizing sustainability. It's about embedding sustainability into the company culture. It's about accelerating sustainable culture change. And a decentralized community full of thousands of people who are in every time zone, every organization, every business group inside of a company can definitely make that happen faster and in a way more organically than a sort of top-down mandate. I'm sure you experience this in your communities, your colleagues, and you have great ideas. You have all kinds of ideas for what the company can be doing to become more sustainable. And so a community is a way to harness all of those ideas, the creativity, the passion, and the ingenuity of employees to come up with some really unique solutions. And then, of course, when you get thousands of people collaborating in the open, what you're really doing is tapping in to the collective intelligence of the entire workforce, the hive mind of you and all of your peers. Communities also enable hyperscale cooperation, right? So if you think about the experience of employees who may have joined their company in the last few years during the pandemic, maybe you never even stepped foot in an office or met a coworker. That could be a pretty isolating experience and a hard way to orient into a company. Communities like this create a sense of community and belonging. They give people a way to unite their passion with their purpose at work. Most of us don't have sustainability in our official job titles. Some of us never really will. But engaging in a community like this gives you an opportunity to roll up your sleeves, get some hands-on experience, and make the kind of contribution that you want to and can make. Critically, these employee communities are a scaling mechanism. In most companies, the number of full-time dedicated sustainability professionals is less than 1% of the workforce. Less than 1%. That is not enough. Planet-sized problems are going to require planet-sized solutions. And so communities like this are a way of spreading out that work, democratizing sustainability work across the other 99% of the people who work in the company. And then for those who do volunteer for leadership positions in the community, what you end up doing is creating opportunities for career growth. You can practice managerial skills, leadership development skills. All of that contributes to employee growth, retention, and satisfaction. And then the primary thing that these communities do is maximize the impact of people's time. When you have all of the things in one place, one community, where you know that you can find a resource, ask a question, get an answer, it saves people countless hours from having to search all over the place to find what they're looking for. That also allows for increased connection, cooperation, and collaboration across the entirety of the organization, a sort of connective tissue, a mycelial network for any of you biomimicry nerds out there like me. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, employees have all kinds of great ideas on what the company can do to become more sustainable. You put it all in one place, in a central place like a community, what you inevitably end up doing is decreasing idea loss and the randomization of employee suggestions. So we're going to close out by talking about some of the success stories that came out of the Microsoft community. Now, some of these are internal. Some of them actually have left the four walls of the company and gone out to change the world. And so the first thing that I want to say is Microsoft became a very industry-leading corporate sustainability leader in 2020 when it set these big sustainability commitments. In the years leading up to that, remember, the community was founded in 2018. In those 2 years, the community put a lot of pressure on the company to say, you need to be doing more in this space. Don't take it personally. Nobody's doing enough, but you are a $1 trillion technology company. There is a tremendous opportunity and responsibility for you to step up and go first and help out all of the other companies in the world. And to Microsoft's credit, they fully listened. So one of the first success stories was just getting the company to get more serious about sustainability. And then, boy, did the resources start flowing. So a couple of other examples that started as employee initiatives. The first one is carbon-aware computing. This started as an employee hackathon project. A bunch of software engineers wanted to know, how could we wait to run massive compute loads in data centers until there was enough renewable energy on the grid to actually lower the carbon footprint of those workloads? Started as a hackathon project, it's now a baked-in feature to Windows 11. This is how your computer knows when there's renewable energy on the grid and when to run workloads, or in some cases, charge your device. The next thing that the community did was called the Surface Emissions Estimator. That's a mouthful. Microsoft has its own line of hardware, laptops, computers, and stuff. And a passionate employee wanted to know, how do we calculate the total carbon footprint of all of our devices? And so it took a couple of years. Again, it started as a hackathon project, but now this is a real tool that any customer can use to do a complete lifecycle analysis of their Microsoft hardware and know the carbon footprint. Pearl, did I hear you? Or are you trying to hustle me?
Yeah, I'm hustling you a little bit, but don't worry, keep going. But just if you can start wrapping up soon.
We're almost done. Yeah, we'll pick it up for sure. So Microsoft is a cloud company, right? The whole point of its business is to convince different businesses to leave their on-premises IT and move to the cloud. That ends up creating a lot of e-waste. So another community member said, we've got to create a sustainable disposition guide so that other companies can responsibly dispose of their e-waste. They leveraged the community and they created that. The Green Software Foundation, for any of you who are software engineers and have ever wondered, what is the intersection of software engineering and sustainability? How do I optimize for energy efficiency at the code level? Well, there's an entire international nonprofit and consortium full of academics and practitioners that are answering those very questions. Again, it started in the Microsoft employee sustainability community. The same with design. A bunch of designers got together and said, we want to look at the intersection of digital design and sustainability. You might notice that my presentation looks a little strange. That's because it's a low carbon PowerPoint deck. It has been optimized for energy efficiency in dark mode because that requires less energy than pushing bright white pixels to a screen. Employees also successfully lobbied for the first internal company sustainability training. That's a critical thing. If you want your workforce to be able to do something, you must train them on it. It took a while, but the company did eventually respond. Something I'm really proud of, because this was a hackathon project that I drove in the early years of the employee community myself. Microsoft has an official partnership with the Ocean Cleanup, a Dutch nonprofit that has a very ambitious mission to rid the world's oceans of plastic pollution. Microsoft provides all of their technological needs. A similar hackathon project with an organization called TerraPraxis, which is trying to drop small modular nuclear reactors into existing coal-fired power plants with the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally by 40%. And most importantly, Microsoft works with a lot of fossil fuel companies. It provides a lot of advanced technology for the extraction and burning of fossil fuels. Employees pointed out the hypocrisy of this, and the company released its first set of oil and gas principles, which place conditions on the work that Microsoft does with this industry. But if I could sum it all up in one sentence, the most important thing that this community did was successfully changing the paradigm of who gets to work on sustainability. Remember, less than 1% of the people who work at a company this size have official sustainability jobs. This opened the floodgates to and changed the idea that those other 99% of us who work here also have valuable contributions to make. And now it's time to go into an interactive part. So did you want me to read through the instructions, Pearl, or were you going to cover it?
Yeah, I can, if you want to just take it on your screen and I'll walk them through the instructions.
Really cute and made me happy too. So let's talk about the how, because that's really what you're all here for. The what is inspiring, but the how is how you're going to take inspiration and turn it into action. So let's get started. Now, I mentioned in the first half that Microsoft's employee community was not an employee resource group, an ERG. It was a community of practice. And so the first thing that you're going to have to decide as you go forth on the how is what tool to use for the job. And so these are the three most common kinds of communities that you're likely to encounter in a workplace environment. And look, there's no dictionary definition for these. Believe me, I've looked. So this is the best that I could estimate. It might look a little bit different in your company, but most of you are probably familiar with employee resource groups, ERGs. In my experience, these are the most common kinds of communities in a workplace environment. These are all about connecting people. They are affinity groups. They tend to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're often about the protection of marginalized identities. So at Microsoft, we had a discrete list of about a dozen. They were officially sanctioned by the HR department, and it was things like Indigenous at Microsoft, women at Microsoft, veterans at Microsoft. Now, these ERGs tend to be unmanaged and decentralized and kind of have ad hoc collaboration. There's not a lot of formal process or structure. Oftentimes, the structure of the community is just something simple like an email distribution list or maybe a Microsoft Teams channel or Slack or whatever. And that's primarily what they exist for. Now, if this is the only kind of community that exists in your organization, you might need to start here with the sustainability community. But I will say from experience, it's the wrong tool for the job because sustainability is not a marginalized identity. I guess you could kind of make that argument, but sustainability is a topic, it's a discipline. So let's look at some of the other kinds. The next is called a community of interest. These are also pretty common. They're also unmanaged and decentralized with super ad hoc collaboration, and they tend to just be really, really informal, connecting people around a shared interest. So this could be hikers of Microsoft, rat lovers of Microsoft. You know, these are literally just interest groups for people. And they tend to also have very, very simple, basic structures and complexity. Sometimes they might have something a little more fancy, like a local meetup group. And then finally, a community of practice, which is actually a pretty well-defined discipline. You can go out and do some research on it if you want to learn more. By comparison, these communities are managed. All of the information and resources that the community generates and creates are centralized, and there is regular, formalized collaboration, because the purpose of a community of practice is connecting people to resources. These are knowledge-sharing communities. They're all about collective problem solving, sharing and harvesting whatever knowledge the community generates, and then again, centralizing that information so that it is easily rediscoverable to other people. And these communities can have pretty sophisticated structures, oftentimes sub-communities or local chapters, or maybe entire programs for knowledge management, which are all about, again, harvesting all the good stuff that comes out of the community. So though one answer for this, you might have to just start with whatever exists in your organization. But if you have the option, the best tool for the job is a community of practice, because what we're trying to do is grow the sustainability fluency of the workforce so that a critical mass of people have a basic understanding what the climate crisis is, what are the solutions, what is my company doing about it. From that platform, you can then go forth and organize much more effectively to gain influence and unlock resources. So how do you actually do that? How do you move people from maybe climate curious to, you know, effective community organizers? Well, I developed this system in the 7 years that I was at Microsoft. I call it the virtuous cycle of employee engagement. Now, remember, we defined employee engagement up front. That is actions to increase employee participation in a company's environmental sustainability efforts. So there is, unfortunately, no one-size-fits-all answer for this. But this cycle, moving every employee that you can, or maybe in your case, every community member that you have, through all three phases of this cycle will mean that they come out the other side with a foundational understanding of the climate crisis, what the company is doing about it, how they are uniquely positioned to contribute to sustainable solutions with the skills, expertise, the job they already have, and critically, how to activate other people so that the change keeps on rolling. So let's take a look at how communities actually are a very powerful and cost-effective way to move employees through this cycle. So that somebody said it in the chat earlier, education is the most important critical first step. Absolutely. Until you have a baseline understanding, sustainability fluency, sometimes called climate literacy, you're going to struggle to figure out how to orient yourself and how to get that influence. And so communities provide a way to learn and grow and share in the open. So when you create a place where hundreds or eventually thousands of people can collaborate and share, you are collectively raising the intelligence of the workforce on the topic at hand, which of course, in this case, is sustainability. The community can also either create or point people to training, upskilling, various educational resources. Our community would sometimes create learning paths. So you could skip across the internet. Maybe it's a LinkedIn Learning here, an IPCC report over there. You can curate learning paths to help people figure out what's the most important thing that they can consume to get up to speed. And then, of course, these communities provide direct access to experts. That is the missing ingredient right now. There aren't a lot of experts in the sustainability space. The number is growing rapidly. But talking to an expert, learning from them, hearing from them, asking a question and getting an answer is all a critical way that communities can educate employees and engage them on sustainability. Once you're educated and you have that kind of baseline foundational understanding, you can move to inspiration, right? Because sometimes what you need is to actually see an example of how somebody did it before you can figure out how you might be able to do it. So communities provide a way to crowdsource visible examples of how different employees have made sustainability part of their jobs. Remember some of those community success stories I shared. Engineers at Microsoft designed or came up with a set of green software engineering principles that grew into an international consortium, and now they're inspiring thousands, if not millions, of software engineers all around the world to look at the intersection of sustainability with the jobs that they already have. Sometimes you need to see an example to take it from an abstract concept down to a tactical application that you can figure out how to do in your day job. And then, of course, the community provides a way to celebrate and share those success stories, or maybe the lessons learned in the community's own rhythm of business. So maybe you have a monthly call, a monthly newsletter. You can keep that drumbeat going to share inspirational things out with people and let them know what their colleagues are working on. And then a really cool thing that came out of the Microsoft community were crowdsourced role sustainability guides. So for Earth Day one year, all of these employees got together and said, okay, generically, project managers, software engineers, finance analysts, what are the unique ways that each of us can contribute to sustainability with the jobs we already have? And then they crowdsourced it and they came up with a checkbox and a list. You may have seen Project Drawdown's job function action guides, very much the same. If every job is a climate job, then each of us has to look at the intersection of sustainability with the jobs we already have and figure out how we can uniquely contribute. Communities are a great way to disseminate that information. And then, of course, it's all about activation, because you can be educated and inspired, but if you don't do anything with it, it's not really going to be that helpful. And so communities like this can create programming that give employees the resources needed to turn their ideas into projects. Sometimes that's as simple as a small budget that can unlock buying a piece of hardware if somebody wants to tinker or build. Like one of the things that got built over and over again at Microsoft was machine learning cameras that could sort waste. So as you would go throw away something in compost, landfill, or recycle, the camera would look at it and tell you what to do. So sometimes it's just as simple as giving people a little bit of money to buy something to build. But also those volunteer leadership opportunities in the community can activate people. It gives people a sense of agency, of leadership, things that translate into their own career development, independent of sustainability. And really, again, what you're doing is trying to create culture change. You're trying to take sustainability out of an operational thing that one team drives and turn it into a core cultural value that everybody at the company feels responsible for. And communities are a really beautiful and powerful way to do that. Now let's talk about how community work is different from the work many of us have been trained for in our careers. For a lot of us, we get to where we want to go in our career by becoming experts. And you become an expert, and then you sort of zealously guard and protect your knowledge because that's what makes me an expert. And if I don't protect that, I won't be an expert anymore. Community work is the opposite. You need to work out loud and when in doubt, overshare. I notice a lot in my experience as a community member in Work on Climate Slack that a lot of people will start a conversation and then move into DMs. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes a one-on-one is the right way to go. But the community benefits when people see the exchange of ideas and information. Here's the question. Here's the answer. Here's a resource. Here's a question. So when you're doing this work in your communities, you're going to have to train yourself to work a little bit differently. So work out loud and overshare. Now, look, every one of your companies has a different culture. Some are small startups that are nimble and not afraid to experiment and fail fast. Some are dinosaurs who don't want you to do anything that even looks like innovation. You need to let your sustainability community be an environment where it is okay to experiment and fail fast, because guess what? Nobody has ever done what we are trying to do before. There isn't a blueprint. You're going to have to figure it out. It's going to look different and unique in each of your companies. And so you're going to have a growth mindset and be willing to go fast and break things to figure it out. When it comes to organizing communities, less is more. It can be tempting in the beginning to get really sophisticated or try to solve every problem or, kind of over-engineer things so that the community is effective. But if the original goal of the community is to make it easier for people to connect with each other, to resources, to experts, and you end up creating a web of things that they have to sift through to find it, you've sort of missed the target. So especially in the beginning, start simple. If all you have at your company from a technology standpoint is email, that's fine. Our community ran on an email distribution list in the beginning. It doesn't have to be fancy to get off the ground. Less is more, simple is best. As you go forth and start generating programming and things that your community is actually doing for its members beyond just a conversation forum, you should focus on asynchronous on-demand resources first. If people, we saw this show up in the chat, people are busy. The incentives aren't aligned. They don't have time to engage with the community. If you're relying exclusively on synchronous things like live calls, you're going to exclude people. So I'm not saying don't do that. Calls are a really important part of building connection and relationships. But in the beginning, you should focus on asynchronous stuff that people can consume on demand. Maybe it's a learning path. Maybe it's a recorded 5-minute video that summarizes an article or something like that. That's going to be easier for people to fit into their busy schedules. And if they just constantly miss meetings, they're likely to feel like they don't belong to the community and they might drop out. Number 5, communities are a long game. Patience, persistence, tenacity. You will encounter a lot of obstacles doing this work. People will tell you no. People will ask why you're doing this. People will actively try to block you. You must move beyond all of them and understand that it takes many, many years and much hard work from a lot of really passionate volunteers to build a growing, thriving community. So patience, discipline, tenacity. And then you're probably going to be running this community with volunteers. Use the buddy system. A single volunteer is a single point of failure. If you assign a single volunteer a task, a program, a function, a project, make sure they have a buddy. Not only does that create more community, more connection, more interaction, but it also is redundancy in case somebody gets busy or gets sick or their job gets crazy. Always use the buddy system. Now, how to build an effective community. Here's a couple of other tips to get started. So you did this in your workbook exercise. Before you start, because maybe you're going to leave this call super energized and you want to go start building, which is great, and I hope you do. But before you start building, take a step back, see what already exists and leverage that. What I have seen in many companies is the existence of multiple sustainability communities that are kind of doing the same thing, but in a disconnected way. There should just be one community in your organization. Now, again, you can have sub-communities or chapters, if it's a global organization or a national one, but see what already exists, learn from the people who came before you. Maybe they tried to run a green team and it ultimately failed. Learn from that experience, understand what happened, see what exists and leverage it. Don't start from scratch if you don't have to. Make your community purpose clear. This one is so simple and so many people skip over it. If people think about your colleagues who have never heard of this or aren't looking for it, and eventually they stumble across the community, if they can't, in about 30 seconds, understand what the purpose of the community is, they may never engage with it and just move on. So this can be as simple as just crafting a 1 to 2 sentence mission statement that makes it crystal clear to the company, to your community members, to your volunteers who are leading it, why you exist. So the mission statement of the sustainability community at Microsoft will not surprise you. It was make sustainability part of everybody's job. Same as my mission. Feel free to use that one if you want. It's a pretty good mission, I think, but make your community purpose clear to people. Also, make it easy to participate. This goes back to, keeping it kind of simple. What is the current workflow in your company? Are you on Slack? Are you on Teams? Are you on email? Make it easy. Go meet people where they are at. Make it easy for them in their normal workflow to engage with the community. Don't use some platform nobody's ever heard of or do something that's really complicated. Again, start simple, meet people where they're at. Make it easy and fun to participate. What we saw over the years at Microsoft was that people said, engaging in this community is the most fun part of my job. So if you make it fun, people are more likely to come and stick around. To the extent that you can, align the actions of your community with company sustainability goals. You don't want to be working out in the ether doing something that's completely disconnected from what the company is doing. You're not going to be able to secure top-down support, executive sponsorship. So to whatever extent you can, make sure you understand what your company is trying to do for sustainability, and at least in the beginning, align to that. Later on, as the community grows and gets a little more sophisticated, you can start getting ideas that are maybe a little bit outside the box, but you're going to have to build trusted relationships with those key stakeholders that you listed out in your power mapping exercise before you can do that. I cannot stress this one loud enough. Seek executive sponsorship. If your company has a CSO, that is the logical first place to start. So again, as you're doing that, see what already exists and leverage it, look around. Look at the company's sustainability commitments and strategy. Are employees part of that strategy? If not, that's an invitation for you to go to your CSO and say, hey, I have a question. What role should employees play in our sustainability strategy? If they don't have an answer, pull up a chair and figure out how to work it out together. Executive sponsorship adds legitimacy, top-down support, and resourcing, which are critical ingredients to keep a community going years and years down the road. Once you have all of that stuff, once the community has grown enough, gotten sophisticated enough, proved its value, you can start making the business case for resources. Maybe this is headcount. Maybe it should be somebody's formal job to run the community. Oftentimes, somebody on a central sustainability team has employee engagement in their job title or in their function. Maybe it's just as simple as getting a budget so you can do in-person volunteer events. But once you get a little further down the journey and you've got your community off the ground and you've been able to demonstrate that it's growing, it's thriving, there's top-down sponsorship, you can then start making the business case for resources to turbocharge it. Now we're going to close out by talking about community management, which is sort of tangential to employee engagement and sustainability communities. If you want to actually manage your community effectively, these are the 3 critical ingredients: people, process, and technology. So we're going to cover this quickly, and then you're going to go do the next breakout where you're going to actually try to answer some of these questions for yourself. So this is not a completely exhaustive list of questions. And I also want to say that you don't have to have the answers to these questions today. That is okay. What's important is that you start thinking through this, because as I said before, communities are a long game. It takes many, many years to grow an effective workplace sustainability community. And so if you're one of the primary organizers, you've got to be thinking a little bit in advance, sometimes months, maybe years, about how you're going to accommodate for that growth. So on the people side, you've got to start thinking about roles and responsibilities as you begin to build. What are the roles of volunteers versus paid employees, members versus community leaders? Sometimes it can be as simple as just creating a list of roles and responsibilities or job descriptions that help clarify that to people. Again, with volunteers, you must be very clear on what is expected of them. Then you've got to think about who can join the community. Is it open to every person in the company? Are you a weird sort of conglomerate, a subsidiary of another company that's on different IT? You've got to think through who is even your target audience, who's eligible to join the community before you can start promoting to them and trying to get them to join and recruit. Who is ultimately responsible for the community? Is it just you, the hardcore climate activist at work who's really passionate about this? Again, is it somebody on the sustainability team that has employee engagement in their remit? Figuring out who has ultimate responsibility for this is a clarifying objective that will help you succeed. Then what role does executive sponsorship play? Maybe there's none today. Maybe you have a sort of in-name only sponsorship, but you're going to have to get clear on what role executive sponsors can play to support the community. And then if you do have a larger national or maybe international community, start thinking through those sub-communities and local chapters. How are you going to accommodate for that different structure? Now, process, right? You've got your people, you've got clarity on your roles and responsibilities, you've got your mission statement, you've got your executive sponsor. Great, the people are lined up. Now, how are you going to actually create a machine that sticks around long after you're gone, because you're a volunteer as well? So how are volunteers going to be recruited, selected, and onboarded? Again, you definitely don't have to have this figured out on day one, but start thinking about it. A critical part of community management is actually pretty boring and not very sexy. It's process documentation, because when you have a bunch of volunteers handing the baton to each other every 6 months or whatever, if they don't have to start from scratch, if they can consult a document that's outlined exactly how this process was created or run, your community is going to be significantly more efficient. So with those volunteers, how long do they stay? What happens when they go? What are the rhythms of business for the community? Are you going to run a call every month? Are you going to do a newsletter? Are you going to do it quarterly? You've got to start thinking about your calendar. What are you going to do and when are you going to do it? Creating consistency for your members will also increase engagement. What is the user journey from community discovery to active participation? Think about that persona of a random employee who's never heard of this or never thought about it. What happens when they find your community? What happens? How do they go from passive observer to active contributor or volunteer leader? And then as the community grows in sophistication, how does it document its processes and resources? Maybe you use Notion. Maybe you use Microsoft OneNote. Maybe you use whatever. You've got to think about the way that you're going to centralize and store all the stuff that the community needs to function. And then the last thing is technology. This is the literal digital or physical infrastructure that's going to be needed to organize your community. So of the 3, this is actually the easiest one to solve. It's not to say that it's easy, but choosing a technology platform inside your company is probably a decision that's already been made for you. Again, go with the current workflow to start. As the community grows in sophistication and size, you can change that later. But if you're an email-centric company, start with email. If you're on Teams or Slack, whatever, you get the idea. So you need to think through what digital and physical platforms are going to be needed to organize the community and its resources. How are community members going to communicate with each other? Again, this goes back to that sort of digital infrastructure. How are you going to use live events? What about asynchronous activities like chat forums? And then for all the great stuff that your community generates, where does it get stored so that everybody knows where to find it? So again, you do not have to have answers to all of these questions today, but these are things you need to be thinking about for the long haul if you want your community to grow, because anybody can start a sustainability community. ensuring that it thrives and grows and actually continues without you, if you're the primary organizer long after you're gone, is a totally different ballgame. And people, process, and technology, thinking through these things, are going to get you there. And so now I believe it's time to go into the second breakout group, where you'll see a very familiar slide and you'll start thinking through this and writing it down for yourself.
Yes, absolutely.